in London. So we will kick off our webinar. On the screen, you can see my University of East Anglia colleague, Paul, who works behind the scenes to make sure that this course runs smoothly. Thanks very much, Paul, for setting this up and for everything that you do for the course. And welcome to the learners who've joined us. I can see Tessa and Alex are with us. Somebody else is joining in a moment as well. We'd hoped to have a couple of our students from the brand leadership course at the University of East Anglia with us today, but they're in another class, I'm afraid, so that takes priority. Hello, Rosie, too. Welcome to Rosie. But never mind, I'm here and happy to answer whatever questions you have. At the bottom of right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a pink tab with a white X in it. If you click on that, then you'll see an icon that's a speech bubble, and that's how to get into the chat function. So please do use that to ask questions, or if you want to, just turn on your microphone and we'll chat. I'm absolutely happy with that. And really the next 30 minutes is yours. We are recording this, so this conversation will be available to all the 650 learners on the course this time. I'm sure this is going to be a lively conversation. And I'm also delighted to say that my university colleague Nick has just joined us as well. Nick and I run the brand leadership postgrad course at the University of East Anglia. So he and I are here to answer whatever questions you've got and take the conversation in whatever direction you want to go in. The first question I've got in front of me is a really interesting one that takes its starting point from the name of the course. So is the secret power of brands still secret? Or actually, do consumers know all of this and knowingly play the game? Nick, what do you think? Is this all a great kind of game that companies and consumers and employees all join in?
Hi everyone, can you see me?
We can indeed, Nick. Yeah.
Sorry, what was your question again? Is the secret still a secret?
Yes, or we all understand what's going on. We can all decode the adverts and we all join in knowingly. What do you think?
I think personally, I think the secret is still there. If firms have not woken up to the digital consumption yet. I think most firms would have woken up to the digital consumption given the last 18 months, and they probably will realize how to kind of rebrand, so to speak. Yeah, not just from commercial consumption, but also public services as well, in terms of that whole change of work and so forth. And I think one thing that really struck out to me in the last week was that I think they were saying that the half of the top 100 FTSE companies in terms of their brand was talking about how they're going to change their work methods in terms of coming back again to the city. When we were talking about UK and London. And just as they made that announcement, where half the FTSE companies are saying that they're going to change the way they work, we have Goldman Sachs saying, no, you're coming back to the office on May 17. And I thought, okay, that's very interesting. Am I missing something? I mean, is half the FTSE companies wrong, or is Goldman Sachs right? I don't know. So in that sense, that's still that secret. It's that, does Goldman Sachs know something that we don't know? Because most, and also that follows HSBC, which is also another very strong brand, saying that no, they're going to vacate 2 floors of their offices, and they're going to get their CEOs to move down to to level 16 or 18, where the high rank officers or directors are going to join the rest of the workers in terms of open space, and that's topic. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, I think there's still a secret there. It's just a matter of whether whether you will be able to get that competitive advantage. And me being someone in services, that competitive advantage is a lot to do with what we call operand resources, intangible resources, not just the tangible resources, but what we know, our knowledge and our inputs into how we move forward given the last 18 months. I think that's the long and short of it.
Tell me that again, Nick. Operand.
Operand. I'm going to write that down in the chat.
New one for me.
When we talk about operand resources, that operand, and that's basically the intangible. So I'm going to write that down again one more time, which is intangible. Wait, let me spell that, intangible. And then you have the opposite of that, which is the operand with the D. Operand resources, and those are the tangibles. So if you were to look at how we do this, intangible and tangible resources. So if you're talking about services, so right now the two of us are sat here together with Paul, who's moderating. We have tangible resources to deliver this particular service, which is basically the computers, the keyboards, our cameras, and so forth. But there's a lot of intangible, which is the operand resources that are being utilized at the same time. So, most of us will have got to think about this, what we are doing and how we are using it in terms of this service. Yeah.
So I guess brand then is one of the ultimate operant resources that any.
Correct. So trying to understand that operand resources and how brands connect. How I think today we still talk about, Robert, how we still talk about the brands being owned by the users. The latest with Manchester United, right? And how they were so upset with the owners, but that brand is quite strong, in terms of that football club.
And I think because I'm pleased to know this new word operant. This is a really useful word. I think in the practitioner world, people who work as brand managers or brand consultants, they still actually think that brands belong to the companies.
Yeah,
they don't quite get this idea that the consumers and of course employees are actually the people who determine what the brand is all about. And and I think the football story was fantastic from our point of view. The Super League that failed showed how wrong that point of view is. That you can be, and they were advised, weren't they, by people like Goldman Sachs, the bankers who are supposed to know how everything works.
Well, I think Robert, on paper, the firm owns the brand because the brand definitely has an intrinsic value that when it comes to due diligence, if there's always a takeover, if there are mergers and acquisitions, that intrinsic value of that brand is always there. What it's worth in terms of the money that it's worth. But really, also, if you look at it from an intangible perspective, that brand is owned by the user because the user or the consumer sees that brand in its own value. So, for example, how you look at, say, HSBC and the way I look at HSBC, we will both have different value systems in terms of what HSBC does for us. So, and I think I will come back into my whole service and service dominant logic view is that the firm cannot create value. It only offers a value proposition, and it's up to us as consumers to create that value for ourselves. Yeah, and trying to.
Service dominant logic is another great phrase. Explain that a bit, Nick. Service dominant logic.
Yeah. So the service dominant logic, and this is quite interesting with brands as well. So you do see quite a number of service dominant logic research going on, in the last decade or so, but you hardly see brands being discussed in a service perspective. So the service dominant logic basically says that there is no such thing as a product in our world. Everything is a means of delivering a service. So anything physical, anything that's product oriented is usually a platform to deliver a higher construct to the user. And so if you look at it from a brand's perspective, that consumption really is about us as users identifying with the brand and being able to extract that value for ourselves. So service dominant logic goes on that basis, where if you have a particular brand that you belong to, or not belong to, but a particular brand that you subscribe to, in all sorts of ways, whether you buy it, whether you use it, or whether it's meant, whether it's an artist, music, you subscribe to a particular brand because only you understand that value that you can derive from it. No one else can understand it. And so it is up to the firm, if you're a brand person, to try and understand that user. Yeah. So with the digital platform now, because you're almost individual, you can almost talk to the consumer individually, you can understand that what it is that makes that consumer tick. So if I was Manchester United now, in order to preserve my brand, I would digitally now try and understand what it is that they don't like about the owners, what that damage has done with regards to them coming in onto that Super League thing. Not only just Manchester United, right? Apart from MU, I think there were 6 of the football clubs in the UK, which are very strong brands, and individually, Man U, Man City, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they all should now start to understand what their brand means to their users, what it means.
So even I went out this morning and bought a big bag of crisps in the supermarket. Is that actually a service then, rather than a product?
Yes, definitely for me, definitely a service. What does that? Was it Walker's?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a son, and my son doesn't take anything apart from Walker's. If I try and buy him a different brand, and so the other day, interestingly, I did ask him because he alternates between Pringles and Walker's.
Okay.
And for him, there is a difference between Pringles and Walker's. And I was trying to understand the consumption behind it. It was so interesting, whether it was the shape, whether it was the taste, whether it was the color, it all had meaning. It all had meaning. But it's only to him, So how he understands Walker's and how you understand Walker's as a brand is very different. Yeah, and most of it is operand, yeah.
That's operand. So in a way, then maybe the secret power of brands is actually that brands get us, the consumers, to do the work, to do the value.
Yes.
That is the secret power, really.
Yeah, or at least the firm trying to understand where the consumers are coming from, not so much in terms of the repurchasing, but more in terms of the psychological consumption. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, look, thanks, Nick. So, Alex, Rosie, Tessa, if you've got any questions, then do click on the pink tab at the bottom right of your screen, which will get you to the chat function, which is the speech bubble icon. And do put any questions you've got in, and Nick and I will do our best to answer them in the rest of this webinar. So another question's come in, which is how easy is it to get a job in branding? This is a much more practical question, and maybe if I jump into this one first, I think it's not easy because there's this classic catch-22, which is that you can't get a job until you've got experience, and you can't get experience until you've got a job. So the only way to get into branding, if that's what people would like to do in their future career, and it is a great career, I've had a fantastic time working in this area. You somehow need to break through that, and that's one of the reasons that we do the brand leadership course at UEN, because that gives people lots of experience in the course of the year that they can then use to help get jobs. And our students seem to succeed, Nick, don't they? They seem to be able to get a job, something not necessarily instantly, but within a few months, everyone seems to get something out of branding.
Yeah, I think for those of you who are looking for jobs, I think it's a lot about persistence. I must say that with our previous cohorts of students, it's always about persistence, and sometimes it's about holding out for something that you think you will enjoy. And for some, it's more about I'll just grab the first job that comes my way. So yeah, I think it's different for different people. Who's that?
we've got a question which we'll answer in a second. Just while we're thinking about careers that people go on to, I was really pleased over the weekend to see that one of our students from 3 or 4 years ago, who did very well on the course and has been working in brand consultancies in London since, also got elected to one of the councils in London. So he's now also a successful politician.
Yeah.
So,
No, and don't forget about Mo. Two of our students who managed to get a grant to start a business, and then suddenly they've got another huge grant coming in as a startup, looking at biodegradable packaging. And I'm very, very confident that what they're doing is going to be one of the next big things. You know. Yeah, I know. I was quite surprised with that one. Yeah, but yeah, they go on to do different things. Yeah. Let me just see tools.
So Alex, I think Alex is saying that a lot of companies buy things just on the lowest price. I get this is in the kind of B2B world, and clearly, if you're selling in that world, you don't want to be continually fighting to have the lowest price. Is there a way that you go about branding your way out of a position like this?
Wait. So before Robert, before you answer that, let me just answer it first.
Yeah,
okay?
sure. Yeah.
So Alex, I would say, because my other parts of research it's also in pricing, and not the economic price, but more about marketing pricing. So in my world, I personally believe that there's no such thing as loyalty. However, 90% of the time you would see that price will win overall, because especially if you are in a company and you're tendering, and as a buyer, industrial buyer, you always tend to go for not necessarily the cheapest price, but the ones that will give you the most value. And again, I would say value in the broader sense, and what the company achieves for it. However, there are other aspects of pricing from a marketing perspective, which is not necessarily linked to the number. Yeah. So when we talk about non-monetary pricing, things like effort, time, convenience, relationship, trust, those are the things that you cannot quantify. And again, I will go back to the operand resources, where things cannot be quantified. And so when you start looking at non-monetary price, that's when you're able to price based on what your customer or consumer wants. Yeah. But that's where I would stop with my pricing issue. Yes. But yes, Robert, please.
Okay. So we were talking a couple of weeks ago to a business operating near the university that's an artist blacksmith. So he makes objects out of metal, including sculptures and things to go in the garden. And he was saying that he invested in branding, basically. He created a really smart-looking website, a good Instagram account, and commissioned some really high-quality photography. Not very much, while taking really good photos. And since he's done that, nobody has questioned his pricing. And just doing that, just doing things like for really good quality photography, project an image of a really high quality product that people feel happy to pay the price for. And don't forget, in lots of contexts, people are happy to pay more because they think they're getting more. A high price is often a signal, that it's a perceived signal of higher quality. So I think, Alex, in the end, you suggest that people who are just looking for the cheapest are probably not the ideal client, and I would agree with that. I think it's important to establish the value that you think you offer your customers, your clients, and stick to that, and not be tempted to cut prices.
Yeah.
Go on, Nick, go on.
No, I was going to say, to add to what Robert has said, a lot, because I think in that sense, Alex, you're referring to a B2B platform. So when it comes to a B2B platform, I would say it's not so much about the price, but it's about the relationship. So if you're interested in relationship marketing, it's got to do with that trust and what other boundary spanning things that I can do for you. That is not really specified in the service level agreement, but definitely being done with the relationship side of things. Yeah, if you know what I mean, Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. I think in B2B it is all about the relationship. People buy people. And,
Yes.
the other thing I would just add to it, even if you are in the business of the lowest possible price, like the discount supermarkets in Britain are, for instance, it is very effective business to also have some premium stuff in your mix. And I think one of the reasons that Aldi and Lidl have been so amazingly successful in Britain in the last 10 years is that not everything in their stores is selling on cheapness, because they have premium ranges too. The premium ranges are still very good value, but nobody wants to be a cheapskate. Nobody wants to think of themselves as someone who only buys the cheapest possible product. So there's lots of opportunities to just push prices up a bit and in a way get more from your customers by offering them more. So short answer to your question, and that was a long answer, but the short answer I think is yes. Branding can justify higher prices, and that's one of the reasons that companies take it so seriously. If anybody else has got a question, please do type it into the chat box. You just click on the pink tab at the bottom right,
and hopefully, Alex, we answered your question. And don't worry, it's not that long. It's quite is it cloudy in London today?
Yeah. There's a little bit of sunshine in London.
It's quite cloudy here today.
I was up in Norwich on Saturday, Nick, and never got so wet. It was pouring with rain. Didn't stop raining.
Okay.
Really.
Yeah. Tessa, okay, I'm writing stories for which I like to make a brand, like to add later product, but I don't want to use my author's name as a brand. Do you have maybe examples of this? I think a lot of writers they write with a pseudonym, right? I don't want to use my own author's name as a brand. Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I have to say, I think J.K. Rowling. What's his J.K.? Is it Robert Gilbert? That's J.K. Rowling's? She writes under a male author. And then, I mean, in literature, is it George Eliot? George Eliot is actually a lady.
Indeed, a lady, and John le Carré was not his real name.
Yeah, not John le Carré. Yeah. Stephen King has another. Even Stephen King has a alternate name. And Teresa, yeah, I think the reason why they write with a different name. What is that? It's not called a ghostwriter. What do you call them when you write under a pseudonym?
Yeah, I think pseudonym is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a reason why they brand themselves with a different name. It's because they want to move away from a certain genre that they're writing in. So I think when Stephen King writes under his pseudonym, it's about attracting a different market segment, not horror, not necessarily horror, but a different segment altogether. I think it's fantasy. I think usually he writes. Yeah. Or non-Bloom. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But of course, the other thing that you can do, Tessa, is to make the brand not about you, but about your central character or about the world that you've created. So Harry Potter is a much bigger brand than J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is a big brand, but Harry Potter is the big brand.
Yeah.
And there are dozens and dozens of examples of that. So Tessa, if you've got a moment, tell us whether do you have a particular character you've created or a particular world that you've created, because that could be where the brand comes from. We'd love to be able to read your stories as well when they're published. So we'll come back to Tessa in a second. We've got about 7 minutes to go. Rose is asking, would you be able to share your experience of helping your clients embed employee culture rather than just be a brand police? Really good question. And this is another example. I suppose this is kind of co-creation with employees, isn't it, really, Nick?
Yes. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So yeah, Rosie, I mean, I do teach services, and one of the first things we talk about is service culture. And when I talk about service culture, and I use the word culture in a very broad sense, it comes back down to office culture. And there is this study by Hofstede? And it's the IBM study. And yeah, what I would say, Rosie, is go and read up on this Hofstede IBM, where they talk about the different culture that exists in office in a management office environment. That study, I think they came out with about 28 constructs or something like, or 26 constructs of culture, and you can actually look at each one individually and then not brand so much, but have, from a marketing perspective, very acute, sharp type of marketing communications, or what we call internal marketing communications, to try and drive more close working relationships between employees. And I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this saying, but they always say that if there's a change, it's always easy to start from the top down rather than from the bottom up.
And of course, culture is a notoriously difficult thing to change. It's a difficult thing to define, let alone to change. And I think, Rosie, one way into it is, rather than trying directly to change the culture of an organization or to tell people to behave in a different way, is to give people a chance to learn some new things about the market that you're operating in, or what your customers want, or to give them new skills, so that you're getting in directly at culture through capability and knowledge and skills. And we've done that successfully with big companies like Daimler, the company that makes Mercedes-Benz cars, where you don't try to tell your people to behave differently, but you give them a chance to learn how the car industry is changing, and how customers' needs are changing, and they then discover for themselves how they might need to actually operate in a different way. And although in some ways I agree with the top-down thing, you can't do this without top-down support. There are sometimes some strengths in encouraging activity from the bottom up as well. And sometimes, rather than thinking about embedding the brand in the employee culture, rather than thinking about how can the company change its people, think about how can you get the people to change the company? How can you get the people to understand enough about the market to drive the sorts of changes that the company needs to make that will end up being a different culture? So I don't know, Rosie, whether that helps. But certainly old-fashioned way ideas that you can change a company culture by making some nice videos and telling people to behave differently, we know they don't work, and there has to be a much subtler and more indirect approach, I think, to changing company cultures. Okay, HubSpot, incredible stuff on company culture. Yes, the culture code. Indeed. I was thinking about, we were talking about this in class actually last week or the week before, about the way in which, particularly in my company, we used to recruit people looking for a good culture fit. Do they fit our culture? Was one of the most important criteria. And I think that was a mistake, because what that does is you hire people who are the same as the people already there. And if you're a creative business, that's not a great way to increase creativity. And I wonder whether maybe the kind of obsession that have with their cultures and having a very strong culture and recruiting people to fit in that culture could be breaking down a bit, as people realize that actually you want to use the much used word, you want diversity rather than sameness if you're going to encourage innovation in your company. So I think this whole word culture is really interesting at the moment.
Rosie, what I would say as well is that I've done some research on diversity. So what I've done is we have looked at what we call distance or proximity. So sometimes proximity with regards to similarities may not necessarily be a good thing, but sometimes the diversity in terms of distance, in terms of thinking proximities, where you come from different backgrounds and then you come together, that will definitely encourage more creativity. So again, it all depends on the culture which you have talked about, in that respect.
Indeed. Just to finish up, Tessa, thank you very much. Just tell us the name of your dog, please. What's your hero dog's name? If you could just type that into the chat, because this might be the next huge brand that's about to hit the world.
And then we can say we heard it here first.
And you heard it first in this webinar, the first the first public appearance of. So Tessa, if you will just give you a moment, if you can, don't worry if you can't, but if you can, tell us the name of your dog that travels the world. It sounds a brilliant idea, with the purpose to contribute to animal welfare and people's development. It sounds like you're in got a very good idea here, but I think the brand is going to be the name of the dog. But perhaps the dog doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that sense, I think the dog will probably represent quite a number of constructs, like sustainability, traveling, the breaking down the distance. Yeah.
And then all of us who read it, Nick, will then contribute to the brand. Oh, there we go, Joris. Joris. Yeah.
That sounds like a brand name.
It's a fantastic brand name. So I would register. First thing is to get the URL and create the social media.
£5 and register that JR. Yeah, that's to register that name. Could be a goal.
And Joris could be the next big brand. In fact, even the next Harry Potter. We're now at 12:30 in UK time. But thank you all very much indeed for joining in and providing a great conversation for us, but also for the people who listen into the recording of this webinar on FutureLearn. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I'll see you later in the afternoon. Yep.
Very good.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.